broadcast network, AFTERBUZZ TV. Over 20 million weekly downloads in over 150 countries, and your number one source for after-show entertainment. AFTERBUZZ TV, the destination for TV superfans. Producing aftershows for over 300 of your favorite TV shows, interviewing celebrities and showrunners, and bringing you behind-the-scenes exclusives. All thanks to E! Entertainment's Maria Menounos, producer Kevin Undergaro, and internet leader Akamai. Now, let the buzz begin!
Yeah! Welcome to another AfterBuzz recap of Limitless. This episode was Side Effects. I'm your host, JB Zimmerman. You can follow me on social media at JB_Zimmerman. Be sure to always use the tweet and hashtag ABTV Limitless. Frank, how are you?
I'm great. JB, good to be back. We're missing our girls this week.
We are.
Amanda, Emily, so...
Totally.
What up to the girls out there? So sorry to miss you, but I am Frank Maiorana. You can find me on Twitter at Let's Go Frank M. What an awesome episode.
I know. It's too bad, like you said, the girls are gone because this is probably my favorite episode. We got Bradley Cooper. We got like really into the core story. There wasn't really a procedural element as much or even at all. I mean, there are elements of other characters, but everything was so centralized in Brian, in Eddie Mora and Rebecca. I mean, even Nas, we got some light into her.
Yeah, and like Josh was saying last week, by the way, we want to shout out Josh Butler for coming onto the show last week, and we had an awesome interview with him.
So cool to have him.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Josh. But like he was saying last week, a lot of this show has a case of the week element and then the serialized elements too. But this week we got all the juicy parts. We got a lot of Rebecca's dad storyline, which I've been talking about for weeks. I wanted to see more of.
You're welcome, Frank.
Yeah, so thank you for that, JB. And then we got to see Bradley Cooper return as Edward Mora, and he's so good. I mean, that scene between him and Brian on the rooftop, just... we had a really good social media interaction already. Vern, at Vern's Views, said, "Come on, is Eddie good or not?" And after this episode, I'm still left guessing. And I think that's what's so great about this show and the intentions that Eddie Mora has is he goes, you can only see the dark side of us, but here's this, piece of rice that can solve world hunger.
Exactly. I mean, I think a lot of fans were left guessing. I definitely was. People have been commenting, is Senator Mora good or bad? Right. He's kind of, playing people. Obviously, Sands works for him. He doesn't seem like a great guy. So, what are his motives? Like, what is behind the curtain? What is Oz doing? And it was great to see that a little bit. And it's great to see that it was, it seemed like it was for the greater good.
Yeah.
Obviously the best scene for me was when Bradley Cooper was involved and he kind of revealed what's going on. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the episode, please pause this and watch it because it's A, awesome, and B, we get to learn a lot.
Yeah.
It was all a test.
Right. It was all a test, and...
so he says.
So he says. And while we were watching the show, JB and I paused it after the first segment and said, yes, this is what we've been waiting for. And we knew just right away when we jumped in with the episode that it was going to deal with Brian's side effects that he was having, and then primarily with Rebecca's dad's case, because we pick up literally moments after the end of the last episode, talking about Rebecca's dad, and Rebecca's talking with Brian about how he got these files, and she really goes against protocol there, and she did so throughout the episode.
Exactly. I mean, I love how they were obviously foreshadowing what Brian was going to do, but they didn't even leave it for questions. They kind of jumped right in. We hit the ground running. Brian was explaining everything to Rebecca, which is great. I love that, there is so much to this show that they don't need to string us along for so many episodes. It's great that they can just jump in and get into what we're looking for, which is answers.
Right, and it wasn't this big winding conspiracy story case of the week. We were dealing primarily with one or two plot lines, and that's, you know, Rebecca's dad and Eddie Mora's involvement. We did have some Nas and Rebecca back and forth, like you just said a minute ago, which warmed me up to Nas this week.
I know that I felt awkward. Like, is she actually a good character? Like, I mean, she plays it very well because I hated her before, and I was like, first to point fingers at who is like secretly the enemy.
Right.
But you know, after everything she said to Rebecca at the end, I was like, oh, well, she's not that bad.
Yeah. We got a peek into what her true motivations were, which were very smart and a surprise to me.
Right.
That all along, Nas has known that Rebecca's dad was being followed by the FBI, and that she found her and recruited her and has built her up and tried to get her to a point where she could have that top secret access to see her dad's file and truly investigate NZT and staying on, as Nas said, staying ahead of the game.
Right. Yeah, no, I honestly just felt kind of bad for her. I was like, oh, you just see her as like a younger version of you.
Exactly,
like,
that's
adorable.
Everybody wants that. You want your boss to like see you as the one, you know, you're the next me. It's like, okay, great. That's wonderful that you feel that about me.
Right.
So,
I mean, she's still a little cold. She could have done it a little bit more warmly, I think, so we would have liked her from the beginning a little bit more, but you know, it was a pleasant surprise to see that she seems to be sort of good underneath.
Yeah, she is good underneath and had a true goal for Rebecca that was outside of herself. Nas is looking out for the best interests of Rebecca, not only for her career, but for her personal questions that she has left over. She probably sympathizes with the fact that her dad has died. And there's a lot of questions left over that Rebecca has, which she is doggedly pursuing throughout this episode, to her detriment in some ways, career-wise, because she cancels her meeting with the FBI director, all in search of these answers.
Bold move. Yeah, I mean, that's obviously an extreme thing to do when given the first opportunity to meet like the head honcho of the entire organization, especially when that organization is the FBI.
Right, but I sympathize with her.
Right.
If you didn't know what happened to your dad and you've got this chance to go and meet with Eperly.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I think that is the only thing driving her, which was a great thing to see Nas pick up on.
Yeah.
It wasn't, you know, I love that she figured it out and it wasn't like, oh, you know, we trapped you and we knew that, you know, it wasn't like that kind of an easy writing way out of it.
Right.
It was to give Nas more credibility. She figured that out on her own. She's like, oh, well, obviously you would have found out, and that's probably what, you know, has been driving you. Like, she can sympathize with that, much in a similar way that Rebecca sort of, you know, reverse engineered a lot of other situations,
right.
Like how she's able to use real logic,
right.
And it gave her, again, the credibility where it's like, you know, we're not on NZT, we're just smart people,
right.
And that gives us the legitimacy to be in these roles.
Yeah, I love what you just said about the writing of this episode and how that meeting between the two was not, it didn't feel forced at all.
Right.
It felt very real. This whole episode was really well written. There was nothing about the dialogue that made me cringe or that rang false. I really liked the way that scene was handled. And like you said, it was well written, and this episode just elevated the whole show for me overall. Yeah, it was really exciting to follow along. I was waiting for you to fast forward through the commercials so that we could get to the next segment and find out what happened.
Exactly. It was so fun. I mean, even all the big story elements were right there.
Right.
Even this, like, if you can even call them side elements, the red versus blue team was interesting.
Right.
Like, I mean, I think one of the characters said it in the show, like, I do not want to cross you, Rebecca, at all. Right. Like, she would be a perfect supervillain. The plans that she was coming up with, I was like, oh, wow, that is a good idea. Like, super diabolical.
Yeah.
Out of the box thinking, obviously. And a credit to, again, the writers that come up with these mastermind plans. It's great to see that creativity where it's not just used in a phony way to, like, you know, again, make it bigger than it is and have Brian just like quickly solve it like some, smart way. Like, oh, I saw the answer. Boom.
Right.
Like, that's how I tumble your entire empire.
There was an absence of that
Right.
in this episode, the sort of cutesy way that they solve problems.
Right.
There was some neat visual elements when Brian was in the conference room and he's talking to himself, and there's a little blue text that rises up out of the conference phone.
Yes.
I thought that was cool. I've been on some conference calls before, and to have that push up out of the phone would be really entertaining, and probably a lot more entertaining than what's happening on the call.
Yeah.
But they still incorporated elements of the show and what make it unique, but focused on the most powerful elements that we have with the storyline. And all of the interactions between Brian, the scenes between Brian and Rebecca were high stakes. There was a lot on the line, because don't forget, the other aspect of this is that Sands comes along at the beginning of the episode and says, these side effects are about to become really severe, and we want you to frame Rebecca and put her in jail so that she's out of the way.
Exactly. He basically gives him the ultimate ultimatum, and it's like, you have to choose between your own life and Rebecca's. Like, do you want to sabotage her, or are you just going to let yourself die because that is happening?
Yeah.
Like, you experience that. Obviously, he's feeling physical pain, but he starts to hallucinate. It gets, he starts at headaches and then becomes like so intense where he's seeing like cockroaches inside of
that
people.
Was creepy.
And then, it gets to a point where he's on the street. He can't even move.
Right. And this was true in the movie too, when Bradley Cooper was off the pill. Now, the show has introduced this idea of the shot that you need to take to minimize the side effects for 30 days. So this is an interesting original concept to the show, that you have to get this shot every once in a while, and when you don't, and you near the end of the potency of that shot, you near death when that happens. So, and yeah, you're right. On the city, the time displacement that they were talking about, that the doctor, the FBI doctor was talking about throughout the episode, I also felt that this was a really appropriate episode, given that Halloween is this weekend.
Yes,
it has some nice freaky elements to it. Yeah,
really creepy. I mean, even the flashbacks to the security tapes of the NZT trial.
That's exactly what I'm talking about, yeah.
A very dark, like, horror setting, and it's perfectly timed.
Yeah, that guy with he pulled his tooth out and is just showing it to the camera. I thought that gave me the
super creepy,
man.
and it was so haunting.
Right,
all of that imagery, even though it was quick cuts and we didn't really get a full story, you could get what was happening. People banging their heads against the wall, like the creepiest little clips.
Someone's like scratching their arm really bad. All of it was great though, because like you said, it was quick cuts. So at the same time that Brian's mind is getting really frazzled, the editing mirrored that while that scene was going on. And as his symptoms got worse, the flashbacks and the quick cutting became more and more severe.
Exactly. Such good points. I agree with you 100%. I mean, throughout his whole withdrawal episode, the show really gets so visual, and that's what I love about it. It's not just like, we see him tumble and fall and like throw up. We really experience that as a viewer, and I feel like that takes it to the next level. Like, it's not just watching him in agony, acting. It's that plus we're along for the ride. Like, it is so much more visceral that way, where we see like what he's seeing, and we were like, there were times even where I was like, oh god, that's like super messed up, and it gave me an extra reaction. I mean, when he was hallucinating for the first time, when we saw the cockroach like inside, like growing through the skin, I was like, whoa.
Yeah, that was creepy.
That was definitely intense, and even all the colors when they got super blown out and started kind of exploding out of their origins. It made me uneasy because I couldn't really see, and it gave me the same experience I assume he's having, which is like sort of like trying to crawl through this world that he's seeing right now.
It almost reminded me of when you're in health class and you're being taught about being drunk and you put these goggles on and it makes you feel really like disoriented. I felt watching that we were kind of looking through that lens with what's going on from his eyes out, which is so distorted and really makes the viewer feel unbalanced. The camera got shaky. They went to handheld a lot during the time when Brian is really experiencing the severe symptoms, so that adds to the viewer experiencing the same thing as Brian is.
Right. I mean, when his first big symptoms hit him after he meets at Ubient, and for a second or a split second, really, he sees the female character he had in the boardroom, and I remember
let's shout her out. Let's shout her out real quick. That's Jessica Hecht, who
great
was
acting
on Breaking Bad as Gretchen, as Walt's former lover, and at the end,
she gets high up in companies.
Yeah, she does. She marries Elliot, and then she was also in Sideways too. She played Paul Giamatti's ex-wife in another heartbreaking scene between the two. So
great actress. I mean, she was only a brief presence, but a memorable one.
Absolutely.
Again, that where she just looks at Brian, honestly, for a split second, like it. This show gives the viewers so much that sense of being on NCT. Like, I feel smart, like being, totally, like, we both got that, and that's definitely going to play in, come back. Like, let's remember that. Yeah. It's a fun experience to watch this show, because it's not just like, okay, here's the case, and, like, it's going to be that guy who clearly looks guilty. It's, it's a process watching it. Right. It's not just beginning and end. It's like a roller coaster ride. Yeah,
and if you're smart enough to pay attention to the small things, like you were just saying, JB, if you could pick out the look on Jessica Hecht's face, you could see a kindness and a caring and something behind her motivations and what she was doing sitting there that led us to believe that she's just not going to be in this one scene in the boardroom. We're kind of cheating because we know her as a really good actress, so she wouldn't just sign up to sit in a boardroom for a day. She's got to have some lines and have a scene to truly be a part of the episode. But when she meets with Brian and tells him about Eperly still being alive, there's a heaviness and a truth to the way that she played the scene that adds a real gravity to the whole situation. So I really liked her performance in this episode, and hopefully we keep getting quality actors to come in and do guest spots, because the show is blowing up. There's 12 million viewers last week.
I know, it's been a great success, and I think it's for everything we talked about. I really enjoy watching the show. It's again, one that you can't really look away. I mean, there's so much going on, and there's a lot of treats that you can notice that reward you for paying attention. When we talk about the difference between TV and movies being a glance experience versus like a more engrossed, sit down for 2 hours, and this is a lot more close to movies, I would say. I mean, obviously, it's a spin-off of the movie Limitless, so there is that. But, in a serial episodic way, I feel like I'm watching mini movies. I don't want to look away. And like you, I'm ready to fast forward through those commercials as soon as possible.
Yeah, this episode specifically was one that I wanted to keep going. And when it ended with Sands blowing up Eperly's house, I was just like, oh my gosh, what a great cliffhanger. I feel bad for Eperly that he got blown up.
I know, but it's a shame. Well, he talked.
He talked
a little bit too quickly, though. I mean, we can talk about...
What do you mean?
We didn't see everything that, was Rebecca confronting AE or Daniel Kennedy, as his alias is now.
Right.
But, it did seem like he was... giving a lot of information without a lot of restraint.
Right.
And so I don't know much about his backstory. Obviously, he faked his own death, and there's some cloak and dagger mystery behind that. But, upon being found, it seemed like he was ready to kind of sell the farm.
Yeah, obviously Brian wasn't in his right mind when he gave Rebecca the address.
Right.
because I think if he was on NZT or even just normal Brian and thought it through, he must know that Mora's people are following Rebecca if they've specifically called her out by name earlier in the episode, maybe a day or a few hours before. He's got to know at that point that they are following her. And Sands was obviously there and found a person that they were looking for. So you're right. Eperly, or whatever his alias was, became Daniel Kennedy, was very forthcoming and unconcerned at all. And you would think somebody who had gone through faking their own death and changing their name would be a little bit more cautious.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, the flip side of that, the counter argument is, well, this is the daughter of one of my patients that died.
True.
So on that end, I can understand his motivation, but I wanted him to at least check her for a wire or some sort of listening device, or just have him be a little bit more squirrely about the whole enterprise that was chasing him.
Yeah, I mean, again, to agree with you there, I think it is an hour that we have. So I can assume that based off of Rebecca's abilities that she was able to kind of convince him that she's legit and everything would be okay. Having said that, a little taste of it, just so we knew that he's not ready to go completely and just confess to everything. But it doesn't matter because he's been taken care of. Sands definitely crossed that off the list. Speaking, I just wanted to talk about Sands for a little bit. Where do you think he is on the spectrum? Because we got a lot more from Bradley Cooper's character, Eddie Mora, about kind of how he's in terms of the hierarchy of the plan, which is to say not as high as I thought. I mean, I thought he would be more in the know about sort of the master plans of what Eddie Mora is doing or trying to do. And it was interesting to see that, he might just be a muscle guy.
Yeah, he could be a muscle guy. And this was the first time where we saw him at the end of the episode take a really bad, negative, violent role in everything. It was the first time, we've seen him at bars, we've seen him at Brian's apartment. He's got a great killer accent. He's a tough guy, but he's normally sitting there drinking and throwing out his threats at Brian. So this was the first time where we saw him in a cold assassin type role. So it really changed my perspective. And like Vern was saying, and that I quoted him earlier in our show here, it's tough to know if Eddie Mora is a good guy or a bad guy, or if his organization is meant for good and for solving world hunger, or eliminating any resistance. I don't quite understand. And I'll throw a question back at you.
Sure.
What's the value in eliminating somebody like Eperly?
Well, to me, taking that off is just a liability. Obviously, Rebecca was the liability that we were that all the characters were talking about in this episode. It appears that that's not the complete case because Eddie Mora is clearly not threatened by her. But they don't want to take chances. If he is involved in the whole NZT game, and he is spilling the beans, so to speak, my initial instinct is that he would give bad publicity to NZT. And like Bradley Cooper said with the rice, if society isn't ready to accept change or to move on to the next level, no amount of science is going to make that happen. Which is a really great point that I didn't even think about. It's not just, we have the ability to do certain things. It's, are we ready to take that on? There's a responsibility in that knowledge.
It's a great point, and it's true in life now when new products come out and new things happen. There's a lot of lobbying. There's a lot of government scrutiny that goes into new products, new drugs, specifically with regards to the show, any pharmaceuticals. So he makes a great point, and that scene for me was so good because it left me conflicted about the true motivations of Senator Mora. On the one hand, you have the goodness of Bradley Cooper, and we want to trust him. He's a good guy, and we saw the movie where he ultimately came out on top and was going to do some very good things for the world. But on the flip side, you have exactly what Brian was saying to him. You threatened my family, you threatened my friends, and now at the end of the episode, we see his henchman went and blew a guy up.
Right.
So we're left as viewers not knowing what to believe about Eddie Moore just yet. What are the plans that he's talking about? Because he tells Brian during that scene he wants a man of character. Well, are you a man of character, Eddie Moore? Having this guy, this Sands enforcer going around killing people? I understand. I think I understand what his argument would be, which is that, like you were saying, he's a liability.
Right.
If he got out in the papers, he could screw everything up before they've had a chance to really make change in the world. But I still don't know.
Exactly. I mean, I feel like you have to get to the core motivations, and it's not always going to be black and white. Just like life, I don't think that anyone in a power position, can see things like that, where it's just like, the best and worst options are,
Right.
Yes and no.
Right.
Everything is going to affect other people badly. It's kind of like, judging the least bad option a lot of times. And it's a tough call. And I think this show really makes a great point about that. It's not just, let's save the world in a day. Like, even
Right.
the smartest person alive can't do that. It can't just have everybody survive and it's all great for us all. We sing Kumbaya and in a circle around the world.
Yeah.
Bad things need to happen to make greater good things happen. And I really am interested to see, more, basically.
You would be perfect on Eddie Moore's team with that mindset.
No, totally.
Bad things need to happen. You're going to have Mr. Sands and Mr. Zimmerman on the team for Eddie Moore. So
totally. I love how it was explained, because it wasn't just, it gave a lot of weight to Brian's character, and it really raised the bar at, what the stakes are. It's not just, I have a guy for this and I can tell you to do X.
Right.
There's so many different layers. Like, he has Sands and he keeps him, at an arm's length to do certain things. And he had to do bad things to Brian. Like, again, there may have been a safety net that we don't know, like how far it was, but from what he's saying is that it was to make sure that he's someone he can depend on, that he can give him things of higher importance and know that it's really going to be taken seriously.
Yeah, and I really like that scene between them two more than the initial scene that we saw in the pilot, which they have been replaying at the beginning of every episode. You can have as much NZT as you want. Bradley Cooper going in his low, whispery voice. But in this one, he's just relaxed, and he can handle any criticism that's coming his way from Brian easily.
He was a lot more approachable, much more of an even playing field between the two characters. They could talk as almost colleagues or associates. Before it was much more a position of power, like Senator Mora being like, I am telling you what's up. Establishing their relationship, so it was a great dynamic, and props to Bradley Cooper again. Clearly Oscar-nominated actor right there. Obviously, he's great, and during the scene, he gave Brian 5 NZT pills. Now, so far in the show, Brian's only been able to get NZT one
when
a
the
day
FBI gives it to him. And remember, a couple episodes ago, we were talking about this. Brian really wanted an NZT pill when he was going out with his ex-girlfriend, which we found out, by the way, that actress is his real-life girlfriend. Yeah, so I didn't know that. That's a really cool piece of casting. Really cool about the show is that they do incorporate people that they have a chemistry with, because they want it to be genuine. Desmond I feel like, and Rebecca, same thing. So just getting back on the NZT thing, the 5 NZT pills. Now we have a question with what Brian's going to do with it, because now he has this access to 5 pills. I doubt he's going to waste it on a date. I hope he doesn't. I hope he doesn't. I hope he has bigger plans in store for that. But what do you think he's going to do with this?
Ooh, I mean, I'm very glad that he got that little secret stash and popped it in his little record cases.
Right.
Because I was thinking, wouldn't you want to have it on your own terms? And I think we talked about this. I would probably have pocketed maybe a pill or two if the day's agenda didn't seem too harsh at the FBI. But what I think Brian is going to do, good question. I think he's really going to figure out how to help Rebecca.
Okay.
That's his closest relationship.
Yeah.
We've seen that. I mean, other than his family and making sure that his dad and family are completely safe, protected. I feel like he's much more comfortable with Bradley Cooper's character. Maybe they have more back and forth, and he won't have to worry about the threats now that he's quote-unquote passed the test. But I think he really wants to help Rebecca. He wants to see that through more than just, let's solve another case on the FBI's list.
Right, and that's a great point that you bring up about his selflessness. You talked about that, I think, in the first episode, something that you pointed out, which is really smart about this character. He rarely does things for himself, and especially when he's on the pill.
Right. The ultimate example is obviously this episode with choosing to basically die instead of throwing Rebecca under the bus, which is the ultimate test from Bradley Cooper, like making sure that he does have the will to help people, like above himself when it's actually on the line.
He's driving himself down to the bare level of existence.
Yeah, he basically hit rock bottom, I think.
Yeah, and Rebecca wants to come and take him to the hospital, take care of him, and he knows that if he goes to the hospital, then the FBI will find out that he experiences side effects, which is something that they do not know at this point, that he is not immune, that the only reason he can stay on this pill is because he gets that shot from Eddie Mora's team.
Totally. Speaking of which, I'm going to pose a question to you.
Sure.
Because we are talking a lot about the morals of Eddie Mora's character and how that plays out. Would you do the same thing? Would you test Brian to that extreme? Obviously, to the point of him almost dying, but that is a vetting technique. Would you be that extreme?
I think it's a great idea to bring someone to the edge and see how they act. You really get the truest sense of a person when things start to go wrong. Everybody, when you're up and things are good, you could be the nicest person in the world, but what happens when something doesn't go your way? What happens when, you're having a rough week or you're in a slump? Exactly. Then you see the true person. So I totally understand the motivation behind it. His technique is pretty extreme, bringing him near physical, tons of physical pain and near death. But I do understand the idea behind it because you see the truest sense of a person when they are at their lowest.
Exactly. Well, no, I completely agree. Obviously, it's a very cruel way to prove something.
Yes.
But at the same time, is there even another way to do that? Other than taking them at their word?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because, you don't really know how far a person will go until they're tested.
I think, too, though, that Eddie Mora has a lot of power in the mystery that surrounds him. He reveals very little to Brian unless he absolutely has to. If he feels like he's losing Brian, he'll give him a compliment and said so. I need to make sure you're a man of character, he writes down. It takes leaders who are willing to chip away at the obstacles. And Eddie Mora thinks that he is that type of person and sees something in Brian that could be the same. So he's building him up after totally breaking him down. It reminds me of, we were talking about Jason Bourne a little while ago. In the Bourne movies, they break down the operatives to their absolute basic and then build them back up as assassins. So in a way, in a roundabout way, it's kind of the same thing that's happening
exactly.
here.
I love the references because they're not like... It's not done in a distasteful way where it's like, oh, they totally ripped this off.
Right.
It's always an homage. It's like, paying tribute. Obviously, we saw on the Coming Up next, there's a Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Last episode, we talked a lot about Entourage and all the different references there. It's really cool to see them take on popular culture and add that to the show. It's again, there's so many treats in watching this show.
Yeah.
It's great.
Well, especially last week with Josh and having him here, being able to tell us some of the inside jokes that he had going on within the episode. But there's so much craft that goes into each episode that comes out.
Exactly.
Like you were saying, this episode specifically, if I had gotten this script as an actor or a director, I would have just been like, yes, let's just dive into this and create something that's going to be very memorable. This was the best episode of the show so far for me.
I agree.
I think so. So I did want to talk about, too, that we have this mystery about who was clamping down on the NZT users. That was explained by Nas, that all of a sudden people started disappearing, and they don't know who. Someone was clamping down on people who use NZT, and we don't know who. So I think we're going to see Brian in the future. Maybe he takes an NZT pill and tries to unravel what organization is trying to keep these NZT users down. Is it the FBI? We know we have elements in the FBI that aren't altruistic in this show. And then we have the Mora organization, too. So what do you think about that? Who do you think is behind all this?
I hope that there isn't someone that we've seen. I mean, I was pointing the finger at Nas the whole time. Now it seems like, she isn't that mysterious, and she might be, a more moral character than I was giving her credit for. So I would love to see, an equal mastermind that we haven't yet seen. Maybe he, knows some of the same people that Mora does, and he and Eddie Mora is trying to figure out who that is. Yeah. Maybe there is some type of criminal NZT kingpin.
There could be
behind the scenes that is on an equal playing field as Eddie Mora and as his own henchman.
Yeah.
So I would love to see a season wide arc of a conspiracy of a dark version of the NZT side.
I think that'd be great. And I want to correct one thing I said. It wasn't Nas who told Rebecca about this. It was Eperly who told Rebecca about this, that he was treating everyone and that they all disappeared and someone was clamping down on people who use NZT. So it was Eperly who gave her that information, which she then passed on to Brian. So don't kill me in the comments for that. But you're right, there's a dark organization here. It would be great to see an antagonist to Mora, and I'd love to see Mr. Sands go into defense mode in trying to protect Brian. And I think that could be a potential move for them, because if Brian's passed one test already, he's shown himself as a valuable asset. So now it's going to be, I think the tone of their interactions will shift from one of threatening to one of protecting their asset and making sure that he is executing the goals that they've set out for him.
Exactly. Plus, I mean, there's a big point about how the antidote to NZT is not widely available.
Right.
So I really want to go deeper into why that is. I mean, is it because the world isn't ready to all be on NZT, or is it because there is some other force, like we're talking about, this dark side, that's preventing that from happening? Yeah. Obviously Eddie Mora has figured out the formula, just like the rice. What are the reasons for not letting that out?
Well, he's figured out the antidote too.
Right. No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. He has clearly a limitless supply of NZT and the antidote, so it seems.
Yeah.
Why not let that loose? Is there some other barrier besides the fact that he doesn't think that the world is ready that's preventing him from doing that?
Yeah.
From just going to a pharmaceutical company and being like, boom, here's how humanity saves itself.
Yeah.
I wonder how many of other similar in scope things have happened like that and haven't been revealed. Have we approached creating renewable energy? And speaking of that specifically, and what you just mentioned, it would be another reference
to the Watchmen. Because in The Watchmen, you have Ozymandias, who's trying to team with Dr. Manhattan and create energy for the whole world, a limitless supply. But even that, which you would think would be good for everyone, is not. They meet resistance. They have people trying to stop them, and then ultimately Ozymandias is trying to take over the whole thing. So those sort of themes of power and justice and what's best for all are starting to play in here. And you're right. I mean, if there's a piece of rice that's tiny and can give the nutritional value of a daily meal to people every day, and it's tiny and you can manufacture it and solve world hunger, wouldn't you want to do it?
Right.
But like he says, there's people who you
would fight against it. Yeah, I know. I mean, the really good point that he makes is that it is politics, and you have to play that. Like that, it really resonated with me because there are times where I get so frustrated. Obviously, there's a lot of presidential stuff in the media today,
right.
But the government, for better for worse, moves very slowly, and that's again, for good and bad.
Right.
We can't have radical change because that could definitely be used for bad.
Right.
But at the same time, it's very hard to progress when things should be changed. So is it just that political game that's holding him back? I mean, I hope that there is, even if it is that, it's villainized more specifically in a person that we can point fingers at and hate.
So we want to see a villain out there.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
If you creators are watching out there, though this is already shot.
Right.
The season's pretty much already shot. But I know you wanted to share some news and gossip with everyone.
Yes, there is some really good news and gossip.
TV
music. Great news.
Yep.
Limitless has been doing so well, as we talked about, that they have picked it up for a full season order.
Yay!
Which is great. It's been killing it in the ratings, has been really doing well in their key demos, and beating out all the competition, which is awesome.
Yeah, I was reading that news that they are the only show that has built on their audience each week, and now they're up to 10, 11, 12 million viewers each week that are watching the show.
Exactly.
So, and with an episode like this that just came out, people are going to keep coming back and back and back. And so we're, huzzah to all the people over there at Limitless, and congratulations. We're going to be here for the next 15 weeks watching each of the first season episodes. So
no, it's good.
exciting.
It's great to hear that. Obviously, I'm sure the crew and Josh, who was here last week, are probably ecstatic.
Yeah.
Hopefully he gets to direct another episode.
Yeah, we'll have him back on. I hope he does too. He had a great episode too. This is not to shortchange Josh's episode at all. I thought it was awesome.
Right.
And we talked about it last week. So he's got to come back, and let's have him do 2 or 3 more. We'll give him the shout out and the thumbs up there. And so hopefully it helps. It won't help at all, but I hope it helps for the creatives to
as do I. I mean, again, I love the show. I think it keeps getting better, culminating in this episode so far, because it was definitely awesome to watch and talk about. Any predictions from you?
Yeah.
And now, your AFTERBUZZ TV predictions.
Yeah, so I'm going to predict that that Rebecca is going to be, or Brian is going to reveal to Rebecca at some point this season that he is in league with Eddie Mora's organization.
Whoa, bold.
I think after watching this episode, their trust is growing between them, and Brian gave Rebecca information about her dad, and I think he's confessing to her, and he's going to tell her that I do experience side effects, and I'm working for Eddie Mora's organization. I think it'll go that far.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's gonna go that far this season. So I'm gonna disagree with you there.
Fair.
But I do think that Brian and Eddie Mora are gonna be in cahoots We're gonna get some like master and apprentice relationship. We might not see Bradley Cooper directly. Obviously, he's a busy guy.
Yeah.
But I would love if there was some mechanic so that it showed them working together, him sort of following and being where Eddie Mora can't be.
Or, as we saw during the episode, he could text him, and you have a picture right next to it, so his character could still be involved.
Exactly, sort of an invisible hand.
Yeah,
kind of
a note, a letter. I'm sure the writers have many more creative ways that I could come up with here and list to get messages from him. But I agree with you. I want to see Brian become a pawn of not a pawn, a partner.
Yeah, a partner, an associate.
As Edward Mora said, a partner in the Mora organization, and seeing what he has in store. That's what they've whet our appetites with in trying to find out what the plan is for Brian. So now I want to see it. So
seriously, I am so I'm so excited to see more of that.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, when things are of that scale.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of the procedural stuff is huge too. Big CEOs of $1 million, $1 billion corporations,
right.
But what Eddie Mora is dealing with as a senator and presidential hopeful is literally global.
Yeah.
Like, it is on that, like, the biggest possible scale that you can imagine, teasing us with curing world hunger.
Right.
Just like in his pocket.
Right. Yeah.
That's so cool. And I really want to see how the road to making that happen for society and the world really goes down.
Yeah, and like you were saying, though, one thing I did really like about this episode that I'll mention quickly before we wrap up here is that I like that the corporation wasn't behind the problem with the NZT or like killing people. I think that's sort of an overplayed storyline.
Right.
It's the big evil organization and they're killing, the corporation, and they're killing all these people. I like that it wasn't that they had an association with a doctor, but it wasn't direct, and they really didn't know anything until people started disappearing, and then they let the doctor go. And then we meet with Eperly, and he says, yeah, it was nobody's fault but mine. So I really like that episode, and it just goes what we've been talking about all hour, that this show does things in unique and creative ways and keeps us coming back.
No, that's so true. I mean, I love how they handle it in their own Limitless way and Brian Finch's way.
Yes.
So I'm excited to see more. I can't wait to see it next week.
Me too. So guys, thank you so much for listening. You can find me on social media at Let's Go Frank M.
Definitely. And if you liked the show, definitely please rate and review it. Comment on YouTube, iTunes, we're on SoundCloud. You guys can follow me at JB_Zimmerman on all of social media. And you guys can catch me on Thursdays for the How to Get Away with Murder after show.
All right.
We'll see you guys next time.
Cool. See you next week.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later, Limitless.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.